Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Riverdale Season 7, Episode 14. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Another musical episode. Riverdale always has great musical episodes, but this one in particular, I think it's beautiful because it doesn't even fully culminate in an actual musical, jumping ahead, because obviously Kevin's not able to kind of see that through. But that's almost like this interesting parallel, because obviously, like, before all this, in present day Riverdale, he was going to try and, get on Broadway, but that never worked out. So it almost feels like there's a direct parallel in that regard. But what I think too is, and I think this has always kind of been a thing of just like, right, using these musicals as these representations of what the characters are going through and everyone figuring themselves out. Because when it came up about like, oh, this being your senior year, I'm like, wait, are they seniors? It turns out they're juniors. But I think it probably came up before now what grade they were in, but I guess I associate it with the beginning of the series. They were freshmen. We went through their freshman year all the way up to their senior year. So I guess in my head, even though we're kind of rewound, like here in the 50s, I just assumed they were freshmen again. Or maybe that, I don't think that much time has passed since like everything got rewound. So like, I guess like this whole season has been over the course of their junior year, which I think the parallel would have been like, oh, this would have been like their final year, their senior year. But I guess that, Kevin's like, oh yeah, it kind of puts a little pizzazz on it, because it's like, right, their senior year obviously took place right before the time skip, obviously. So it just, there's so many parallels you can be drawn. But like the moment the musical was happening at the beginning, I was like, some of that storyline beats don't match up with the musical. For example, it's like, oh, here's Cheryl and Tony and the Vixens. But I'm like, well, Cheryl had to abandon the Vixens after last episode. So that's why I was like, that seems... Part of that's because Kevin and Clay wrote everything and have kind of created this, like what it's going to be and everything, which obviously Reggie and Jughead immediately bow out because they're like, yeah, we're not about to be all about this, because it's supposed to culminate with like prom night and stuff like that. But it's like, nah, I'm not about to be a part of that. And then everyone else kind of had issues with some of the songs. Archie in particular, well, for one, Julian's his understudy, and I love how that's physically represented by like, oh, we're like trying to outdo each other. Because for Archie, it's like, right, here's a song singing about what I want, but I don't know what I want. And then at the same time, here's Julian like trying to like keep up with me as my understudy, trying to be a better me than me in this representation. So that's gotta be weird. But Archie's at a crossroad. Let's kind of break these stories down one by one. Let's start off with Archie. For him, it is a situation he doesn't know what he's want. He's caught between so many crossroads. It's like, obviously there's the go-to of Betty and Veronica. Which one is he going to choose? But then also, what about it? Like music or basketball? Like, what is he going to choose? And for him, he still couldn't figure out. And ultimately, it's because he finally realized, it's what Jughead made him realize, that he's having an existential crisis about, hey, what do I want for, because the decision you make now could be the decision that determines the rest of your life. It's not even about Betty and Veronica. It's not even fully just about basketball and poetry. It's about just making a choice and having to stick with it. That's hard. It's like, oh, you're so, and Jughead referred to him as a cube, I guess, because you're just so like even kiltered around. So it's like there's this perfect equilibrium with you, and choosing one side over another is just kind of hard for you. And so for Archie, it comes down to just making a choice, and he couldn't make one until the end, where he decided what he wanted to do. And he told his Uncle Frank, but Frank's like, no, you're going to let down the rest of the team, like when they need you. But it's like, they don't really need me. Like the captain in all of this is Reggie. He's basically the leader of the team. He's helping keep the, charge us ahead. So the team doesn't really need me, and I want to follow my passions, because if I don't, I'm going to look back on life and I'm going to regret it, And I think that's kind of like a hard pill to swallow for his Uncle Frank. But it's like, Frank wanted this whole point of like Archie to kind of fall back in line, to kind of like get back, and obviously Archie worked hard to kind of be back in some equilibrium, to kind of put himself back on the right path. And I think the fact is that he's making this choice, that he is choosing rather than kind of being tugged in so many different directions, because and once again, this doesn't just apply here. It's encapsulated in the entire series, and it's culminating in this. But Archie's always struggled figuring out who he is. He's bounced between so many identities of like, the all-American kid, the vigilante, the criminal who kind of went to juvie for a bit. Like so many facets of complicated things of like who Archie is, the soldier, you know, the son, the friend, the boyfriend, the ex, the complicated love situation, the love triangle. Like there's been so many different factors that have defined Archie, and it's only until now where Archie fully makes a decision of this is who I am and this is who I want to be and this is what I want to do. So I love that. Let's tie this into Betty and Veronica, who they didn't want to sing their song because their song was about them kind of fighting over Archie, which obviously, it's like, right, is that how you see us, just vapid women just fighting over a dude? Because it's like, it's more complex than that. It's not just like so one dimensional. And I love that, obviously, what was it? Cheryl and Tony didn't want to be a part of that because when they were singing that in the musical, I was like, that's weird. Why would that be applicable to them? But it's like, right, they kind of have to hide their truths while in this musical. So that's their story. But I'm like, that's so interesting. And I was like, yeah, that didn't make any sense that Tony and Cheryl would be all about that. It's like, no, they got their thing. So. Oh, I wish I could remember. There was this really meta element of the show that I was like, I really liked. I don't remember. Oh, right. It was about Archie. This was like a super meta bit that they had in the episode. It's because it's like, right, because Archie wanted to take so many different paths, right? And Kevin was like, no, we can't do that. Like, if you have a character straight, like, you have to pick one thing, because if your character's like all in these different directions, you kind of lose your audience, and it's going to be like this, protagonist who, is not well written because they can't choose or something. I'm butchering it, but it was something like that, which I was like, I love how meta that is. You know, I mean, it's the deeper levels of the meta because, like, right, that's applicable to Archie in the musical, but Archie, the character in the show, but also that's been a part of Archie's journey across the entire show, like I brought up before. So I love how there's actually two layers. It's like a very Inception, like a meta within meta bit, which I thought was so interesting. But either way. Veronica and Betty, Veronica brings up like, hey, I kissed Archie like after last episode, like after the Crucible. It was after he did his performance, it kind of like I kissed him, but it's like I like Archie, but I like us more. And Betty feels the same way of like, right, me and Archie have known each other our entire lives, but I like what we have more too. So they want to focus more on their friendship. And so when they sing their song, because about how they felt kind of alone, and obviously everyone's got their ideas of who they are, like, oh, you see, but you only see the surface. You don't see what's underneath. You don't see and feel what I felt. And it was this beautiful song. And it seems like, wait, like that now I'm looking at this, I'm like, yo, is this how, once again, these final pairings seem like they're going to be wild, because I feel like for on Jughead front, I feel like we might get a Jughead and Ethel. Like, nothing's happened, but it kind of feels like that might be the case, not unless Tabitha shows up again, but it just feels like that might be the direction that's going. Once again, Ethel's always liked Jughead, it just never became apparent until season 3. So that's going to be interesting if that ends up being the case. But now it's like, oh, what if like Archie doesn't end up with Veronica or Betty, and instead Veronica and Betty end up together? That was never like, they've kissed before, but it never ended up in a relationship situation. But this could be, because it's this complicated. It's like, right, we've spent this entire time trying to clown Mount Archie and not seeing the complicated, interesting mountain that's kind of in front of us right here. So rather than focusing on Archie, they're going to more so focus on them, which I love that you cut to Archie being like, hey guys, I made a decision. I'm very fond of both of you. Fond? They both say it like that. And Archie's like, yeah, but I need to do some soul searching, so I'm going to avoid any more kissing. Well, I'll try to avoid any more kissing. So see you later, alligators, and bounces. And then just Betty and Veronica look at each other. It's like when they had this very beautiful moment, Archie comes to kind of throw a wrench in it. It's like, well, so, I mean, it kind of coincides with what's kind of happening between them, but it's still kind of like, huh. It's just, that's still kind of like, I guess it's like, even with them figuring that situation out, there's always going to be like, I guess it's almost this endless love triangle that is Archie, Betty, and Veronica, that, you know, it's like, oh, this is this for now, but it's like, even then, there's always going to be that complicated wrench in some shape or form. So I thought that was really interesting. Kevin Clay wrote a new song that would fit more so them and Cheryl and Tony, and it is this beautiful song about being themselves, and because they've had to do so many, like live so many lives, and that's been such a struggle for them over the course of the show, kind of being able to fully embrace themselves, how they've, especially in the case of Cheryl and Kevin, who've discovered, their sexuality over the course of this season, where Tony and Clay have been, solidified in them in their sexuality and themselves for a while, where it's been a journey of discovery for Kevin and Cheryl. And I think even along the way, Clay and Tony have discovered things about themselves, and they've just found those discoveries in Kevin and Cheryl respectively. But the song is something that Kevin wrote for them to have privately. It can never be in the musical because obviously he's under a lot of scrutiny. Featherstone would never let it stay in there. But it's like, right, whenever the world catches up and you're able to include this type of song in a play, then me and Tony will be there. But we've already had to do so much pretending. Why, even in a fictitious world, would we ever pretend in a fake world where we shouldn't have to? We have to already do it enough in real life. Why would they have to do it in a play too? So they kind of bailed at the last second too. And it's really sad too, because all of this is happening at the same time, because Kevin's pouring his heart and soul into this musical, but there's obviously these constant complications. I do love that Clay ends up replacing Jughead, Fangs ends up being Reggie, and obviously Julian, being the understudy, plays Archie. And so it is kind of like, oh man, everything's honky-dory. To be fair, that's the version of it they have to introduce to him in front of Featherstone, which he loves it, but the problem is he doesn't. It's too much of a gamble with all the communism scares we had recently, which obviously was completely blown out of proportion. Let's kind of ignore the fact as we kind of went a little nuts and burnt all those comic books last time. Let's kind of ignore that angle to it. But it's to kind of keep things safe, let's play Oklahoma, because if we put Archie the musical out there, will anyone actually come? But Oklahoma, everyone will come to see that, yada yada. And it's so sad because it's like you're trampling on Kevin. Kevin and Clay poured their heart and souls into this musical, and they've worked so hard. They bent over backwards to kind of include what everyone else wanted, because they wanted this to be a cooperative process. But then it's for Kevin, it's just right, I poured my heart into this. I'm trying to make this beautiful and honest as I can be, because if I'm too honest, the world won't accept it. So I'm being restricted regardless. And on top of that, I follow the guidelines, I follow the restriction. And what do? You stomp on it. Something I worked so hard for, I'm pouring on, because at the same time, things aren't good between his parents. His dad is I don't know if that was the bed at the police station or what, but his dad kind of got kicked out. And it's oh, what's that about? And it's Kevin's can we have dinner together or something like that as a family? And they do, but that's when his parents dropped the bomb on him of right, we're getting a divorce. And for Kevin, it's his entire world's flipping upside down. It's he could feel how things were his family was splintering, and he was trying to do his best to hold on tight. He was even hoping that, hey, all three of us could watch my musical together, and probably hoping on some level, he could tell the tension was there with his family. He was hoping to kind of rein it all back in, but they already filed the paperwork, and it's cool, you guys have made this decision, because they talked about it his dad was oh, it's an adult thing. I'm sure for Kevin, it came off very patronizing when his dad was hey, focus on your singing and dancing. It's you're a kid, you can't understand this adult stuff. But it's right, kids are a lot older and a lot more understanding, a lot more complex than you give them. I mean, we've seen that represented in all the facets of this story that is the Archie musical, how complicated everyone's circumstances are of them figuring themselves out and figuring out their place in the world, figuring out what the world would view them as, and how they respond in kind to how the world reviews them. So, and for, like I said, for Kevin to pour his heart in all of this, and for his family to be falling apart the way it is too, he's getting hit on multiple fronts. And so, obviously Clay ends up telling the rest of the group about what happened. It's right, this is about Kevin's parents splitting, which Veronica's parents are splitting too, but I don't think she's really talked to anyone about it. If she talked to anyone about it, it might be Betty. But, Veronica understands that, but her circumstances are a little different. I mean, from what we don't know if it's a cheating thing. It might just be a thing of, hey, nothing worked. It's just, and sometimes, you fall out of love, and just no matter what there is, you try to fix it, but, in your attempt to fix it, you're just, once again, I will always be a proponent of, I think you should try. There's all this whole conversation about like, oh, they feel like some people give up a little to you. I mean, once again, every relationship is different. Every circumstance is different. So it's not a fit all. Whereas like, like a cheating situation, like Veronica's parents, it's like, that's something sometimes people can work through that. But that also depends. Like, hey, some people who are, might be like, yeah, a younger me would have like, forgiven. An older me won't. Like, so like, that's why I'm like, and it also depends on the person, depends on their age and their experiences. So it isn't like a fix all, like not everything could be applicable to every situation. Sometimes it's just, it doesn't work. And I think it is a better situation of like when something's not working too, and you try to make it work and it still doesn't work. I think it is still a thing of, I think it's an appropriate decision to make to get divorced, because all you're going to do is stew in this unhappiness, and that is super unhealthy. So I think when you make that choice, I mean, it doesn't even have to just be about like an actual marriage. It could even just be any relationship. When you make a break, breakups in general, like that sometimes is necessary rather than trying to fix something where it's like, this ain't something that can be fixed. So once again, we didn't get into the nitty gritty of it, but it just might be a thing of, hey, like just things didn't work out. And obviously Kevin, starts wondering like, is this about me? Especially because his dad knows about his sexuality. I don't know if it really came up with his mom prior to this. So he was wondering like, did you guys get a divorce? Because he's like, does dad have an issue with me? And maybe mom doesn't. And she's been a little more accepting of that. But for it's like, what's happening between me and your dad is nothing, you are not the problem, like, and who you love. And it's just like, you will always be my son, no matter what circumstances. And for his mom to hold him, I was like, that was beautiful. And so at the end, when Kevin sings his song and everyone joins in, because Archie wanted to thank him, it's like, yeah, if it wasn't for you, your musical actually ended up helping me figure stuff out. And while the episode's ending, I'm like, man, this musical didn't actually get made, but it still played a very important role, because I think it helped a lot of the participants in it. I think it helped Kevin, it helped Clay, it helped Tony, it helped Cheryl, it helped Betty, Veronica, and Archie, it helped them, and obviously like it allowed other people in the musical to kind of help them too, and to sing that song at the end and Kevin tearing up just and having this system around him to support, because it's supposed to be like, right, it was about Archie and everything, but really it's a Riverdale musical about the people around him, the people who love him, the people who support him. Because regardless of it all, they were all there for Kevin in that moment, singing his song with him and embracing and holding him. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. I was like, that was beautiful. And I don't know if this is the final musical. This feels like it might be the final musical episode. The fact is, there might be other musical bits in an episode, but this is going to be the last probably full-blown musical episode. Like I said, Riverdale's always excelled in these, and they've always been so much fun, but there's also always been like this seriousness and this beauty to it. And for this to be the culmination, if this is in fact the final episode, final musical episode, because I haven't looked it up. I'll include it in the comments down below when I look into it later to see if this is the final one or not. But because there's only 6 episodes left, so I mean there still could be one more. Like I said, there could be musical elements in other episodes, like musicals, but like the full musical episode. This will probably be the last one, maybe. And if it is, what a way to go, and just a beautiful ending of just like that embrace of everyone holding Kevin. It was like, that is. Like I said, I got choked up then. I'm still getting choked up now thinking about it. And I thought that was beautiful. Like I said, it isn't just even about Archie. It's about this Riverdale and how they embrace their own and look after each other. How, and it's been showcased over this final season too, of just like considering this time frame that people can look past their differences, whether it's a race situation or sexuality, and embrace each other and love each other and be there for each other. And I just think that is a beautiful thing that the show has always excelled at and represented that. So, but yeah, I'm excited to really see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.